Okay, so what we're going to do here is there's lots of different ways to find the vertex of this. You may have put this into a graphing software, you may have factored this, but ultimately we're going to try to find the vertex of this using a method called completing the square. Okay, so we're going to be completing the square on this. And so what that means is we're going to rewrite this in vertex form. Okay, so my first step here is if I'm going to rewrite this in vertex form, I need this to be a perfect square at the start. So I'm going to write this as f of x equals x squared plus 8x. And I'm actually going to ignore the 12. The only thing that's important here are these first two terms. So I'm going to ignore the 12. I'm going to write it over at the back, and I'm going to write that in green over here at the back. So the 12, for all intents and purposes, is going to be gone. Okay, but what's important here is I need to know what's going to make this a perfect square. Now, if you remember from the warm-up, it was always whatever that middle number was. And so here, this is always double of that value. And then, of course, we had the square of that value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work sort of backwards in my mind here. So I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say, okay, well, I need to know what half of that is. Half of that would be 4. And so 4, the next number here would have to be 16 because it's going to be 4 squared. So I'm going to take 16. So it's going to be half of that number squared. Now, because I added 16 into here, I'm also going to have to subtract 16. So I'm going to subtract 16 there. Now, what's important here is this becomes a perfect square. And that's the important part of completing a square. So if that becomes a perfect square, my next step here looks like this. I've got x and x. And ultimately what I have here is I've got to find two numbers that add to 8 and multiply to 16. I already know what those two numbers are. It's got to be 4 and 4. And then everything that's left here is I still have that 16, so minus 16 and plus 12. Okay. So now I'm going to keep going with this. I can rewrite this as x plus 4 all squared. And then I just add these like terms over here. So negative 16 plus 12, well, that's just going to be a negative 4. And now if we have a look at this, we can see the vertex right away. We've actually now got this in vertex form. And so now all I have to state is what the vertex is. So the vertex, my x value is going to come from here. It's always the opposite of the sign there, so it's going to be negative 4. And then over here, my y value of the vertex is going to be negative 4. And so that would be one way of finding the vertex here, is we're using that process called completing the square. I'm going to give you a few exercises on the next page to try.